The other scene that really kind of got me, people are going to think, Ankhobia, I'm never going to the cinema with you. But
Don't worry, sister. Them don't deserve me already, you know. Me go to the cinema by myself regular because them thing there, you know what I mean? So I just want to think good, you know.
we get to meet Cox and Dodd. Yeah.
Yeah,
Father, Godfather, Studio One,
yeah,
legend where Jamaican music is concerned. We meet Joe Higgs,
yeah.
another Jamaican musical legend,
Icon.
Godfather, icon,
Yeah,
the man who helped to shape the Wailers
yeah,
sound, along
yeah,
with Lee Scratch Perry and Cox and Dodd.
yeah.
Now, we know that Bob spent some time living with Cox and Dodd, but the
Mm-hmm.
first introduction we get in the film to Cox and Dodd is this sort of a violent type man, which was the first time I thought I've never heard of. Thinking back, I've never heard of Cox and Dodd being a violent man in the way
Mm-hmm.
he was portrayed in the film. But in any
Mm-hmm.
case, we come into the studio. This would have been the most brilliant time, if not slightly before, to introduce the two brothers who were with Bob through thick
Yeah,
and thin,
yeah,
Tosh and Buddy
yeah,
Wailer. You
yeah.
cannot tell the story of Bob Marley without
Yeah,
telling the story of Buddy Wailer, who was his
yeah.
brother. Yeah, they lived together because their parents were married to each other. They had a
100%,
sister and everything. And then Peter Tosh, the man who taught Bob Marley how to play the
yeah.
guitar. It
Yeah,
was like, so that was weird. And then, but I come back to that
yeah,
to continue on the thread of Peter Tosh and Bunny. We get to the scene where Bob and Rita are just having an argument.
yeah,
And she says, because they've been in Europe and she's seen all this glitz and glam. And then she
yeah.
said, "Oh, now I understand why Bunny and Peter left."
Left, yeah.
And Bob says they left because they didn't want to do the work.
Works, yeah. That was a terrible scene.
I
No,
was like,
that was a terrible line in an otherwise powerful scene. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was like, I've never read. And I'm thinking, okay, they say not Stephen, Ziggy Marley was the spiritual director for the film.
Yeah,
They'd have had some historical, not director, sorry, the spiritual consultant. They'd have had some historical consultants. I'd
yeah,
love someone to show me where they got that line from. Anybody who knows the work of Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer, those
yeah.
men worked as hard as Bob did.
One
Those
hundred percent.
guys were grafters. The reason they left was because when they finished one of the concerts, Chris Blackwell or Whitewell had
Mm-hmm.
presented them with a bill for 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, "What is this?" He says,
Mm,
"Oh, this is what you owe me." They're like,
mm,
"You for what? You gave us 4,500 to make the Catch the Fire album.
mm, mm,
Give us some other money to do some tolls. But how does that come to 1.5 million?"
mm.
Because Bob didn't want to argue that out.
Mm.
We're like, "Yo, we're out of here. I'm not giving no. This is
No, so yeah,
Babylon system, and you're trying to tell us this man who's coming to scam us. You're now allowing him to take this to come and say we owe him 1.5 million for what? Do you know what
mm.
1.5 million was like in those days, people? For
Serious
someone
money. Serious
in
money.
the
Yeah.
70s that you owe
Mm,
somebody 1.5 million dollars.
mm,
Do you
mm,
know what
mm.
that would have sounded like?
Yeah, yeah. Serious money.
So which meant
Yeah,
you were ever indebted to these people, which is proven true because the Marleys are indebted to the Chris Blackwell estate, the EMI estate. They don't even own much of the music of Bob.
we will come back to that particular issue. All right, so stick up in there, sir. But on the point that you just raised, and again, a major problem with the film for me. So they had a runtime of 1 hour and 47 minutes. That
Yeah,
means that you don't have a lot of time to go into certain things, and so in many ways, it's best if you're not gonna go into certain things, you leave it alone. And I
yeah,
think that's the problem with what you're saying in terms of they feature certain characters, but then when they feature them or mention them, there's no context for them, and so they end up being portrayed in a very negative way. So that's the issue as far as I'm concerned with the two examples that you just gave in terms
yeah,
of Coxon. Sir Coxon. Everybody know Coxon had his issues and his challenges, yeah, as far as business is concerned.
yeah,
But he's one of the most legendary figures as far as reggae music is concerned, alongside Lee Scratch Perry, who was in the studio with him, alongside Joe Higgs, who took them to the studio. Yeah. So to see the first time you see him is in with and gun is from somebody after somebody, you know, and tell him not for comfy for no money. Yeah, is problematic, especially if you are not going to give any context for who this man is. Leave that alone. You see what I'm saying? Because you don't. Yeah, you don't do somebody as pivotal to the music and to the career of Marley Steele. So you don't do that, right? If you're not going to give him any context, then don't do that. If you're not going to show his genius, don't depict his flaws so graphically. That doesn't make any sense. It actually takes away from the film and the narrative because it doesn't add anything to it apart from some shock value. Yeah, so, you know, and I don't think we as a people should be satisfied with that kind of shock value. I think it's just wrong. The same thing now with Peter and Bonnie. They are not mentioned in the film at all. If you don't know who named Peter and Bonnie, when they must sing Simmer Down in the studio there in front of Lee Scratch and Coxon, you wouldn't know who these people are. Yeah. If you're gonna, when you mention them now, you mention them in the context of them never did want to do the work. And I think that narrative actually originates with Chris Whitehill. Yeah. Because that was kind of I've heard him say things similar to that over the years in terms of you know, Bob was, you know, he was amenable basically to the commercial road that Chris was trying to take them on, whereas Bonnie first and then Peter were not. Yeah, so that narrative, I think that the seed for that narrative is germinates around those particular statements. But again, if there is no context in the film for the relationship between Bob, Peter, and Bonnie, that line is entirely wrong. It nothing there in the film.
Yeah, I think so.
And now, if there was context, it might make sense because maybe that's how Bob did feel. But if you could put that feeling of Bob in the context of we've got some background of their relationship, then it makes sense. If we don't have that, don't put it in the film. You know what I'm saying? It just But go on, choose this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's just you're dealing with.
Sorry, just to say, on the issue of Bonnie and Peter, that is a disrespect, to their legacy. We have to see it 100% in that context, because the name Bob Marley is the biggest name coming out of reggae music in particular, and probably Jamaican history in general. Yeah, so the names Peter Tosh and Bonnie Wailer do not have the profile of Bob Marley. To put that line in this film is a disrespect. Yeah.
Absolutely.
To the legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
And
you could have portrayed. Say again?
Their work ethic speaks volumes. The albums are there. The stand the test of time. You can't do there. Like that if you're lazy.
Sister Ankhobia, Bonnie Wailer dead just the other day. And to the day that he died, he was championing the legacy of the Wailers. Yes? Not just himself, you know. Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and himself as Bonnie Wailer. Yeah, it is not right. Without any context for their relationship, there is no justification for that line in that film. Yeah, there is no justification for it. Yeah, and it wrong. It just 100% wrong.
And because they had to shape Bob, who you just wouldn't get Bob Marley without Bonnie Wailer and Peter Tosh. You wouldn't get Bob Marley without Sir Coxon Dodd, Lee Scratch Perry, and Joe Higgs. Right? Those 5 figures there, and there are other people, but those 5 figures primarily you would not get. You just absolutely wouldn't have a Bob Marley without them. And that's one of the problems I find with the film. It's almost this. Bob had a few influences, Rastafari, but that his genius sprung in and of itself by himself.
Yeah.
And that's why, by presenting it that way, you can run away with this. This is the Marley family film. We haven't got to tell the story of Black history. This is a Marley family. It's about Bob Marley, the one icon. We haven't got to tell anybody else's story. In fact, they're lucky to have been part of Bob's story.
Look, name to Rastafari. No, it wrong. There was no, and based upon the story that they were trying to tell, that they decided to tell, there was no need for it. It's not even like there was any need to have such a line in the film.
Yeah, and even if you understand the story, for example, so when Bunny Wailer tells the story, Bunny Wailer says they began to play in some freakish type of clubs. That as a Rastaman, because he was seen as the most traditional out of all of them when it comes to upholding most spiritual, when it comes to upholding the Rastafari faith, he couldn't allow himself to be seen in certain places promoting music. He didn't feel that the message of Rastafari was for those types of people. That wasn't his audience. Do you get me? And so he left. And to me, that is so brave. Not only that, it shows you a man with full confidence in his own ability to say, you know what, Lao Bob, we're still brethren, yeah? I'm going to go and do my own thing. That's a man of immense ambition and confidence to step out and say, I'm doing my own thing. I wish everybody all the best. Peace.
100%. Sister, did you see the Get Up Stand Up musical that was played in London year before last?
No, I try to avoid things like that because I am... I feel like I'm Marley to death.
No, I get you. I went to see it. I actually went to see it. And as far as everything when it comes to Bob Marley has its problems, right? But as far as commercial products, but as far as a narrative, that play was far better than this film in terms of storytelling. Yeah. Wow. Now and that came to mind because of that what we're discussing right now in terms of how they dealt with the dynamic of the Wailers and then Peter and Bunny leaving. Yeah. Yes. They pick them in England. They depict the hardship that they were facing. Right. Yes. So at least you have some context for why this thing fell apart. Yes. Yeah. And so they have some scenes in there where, you know, Peter is speaking critically of Bob and whatever. But at least when you see that, you know, say, all right, they've got a history, they love one another, but they have some difficulties at this point that cause whatever. At least there's some context to it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. It never have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the shame. I
get precious about well, Peter, Tosh and Bunny in general, but Bunny Wailer in particular, because he passed away as an elder. And the extent to which I know he tried to preserve the thing, you know what I'm saying? You know, in a way. He did a great works, Rasta. And he deserves better than that.
Absolutely. He was the last one to leave the scene, and he stayed true throughout. True throughout. Absolutely true. Again, this is what happens when you allow Hollywood to come in and tell your story.
The Babylon system is the vampire.